The cars of Stranger Things are likely a familiar sight to those of us who were fortunate enough to have experienced the 80s. Joyce Byers' green Pinto is a perfect representation of the era. The ultimate in basic transportation, Pintos were everywhere at one time. Ford did offer the Pinto in surprisingly upscale trim levels, but most examples were far more basic. Television ads attempted to convince the buying public the Pinto was not only compact, but also sporty. And it is true the Pinto was offered in a wide array of configurations. From bare bones and no frills to semi-luxurious wood-tone cladded wagons, the Pinto attempted to make up for its small size with seemingly infinite customization. The Pinto sold well through the 70s, and many examples were driven throughout the 80s as hand-me-downs. Unlike the Holly auction models in the brochures, most were exactly as the example we see driven by Joyce: basic transportation and not much more. Simple, fuel-efficient, and moderately stylish for the time. As with Mustang II and Maverick, the Pinto was even offered in special editions such as the Stallion trim level. But as most of us are aware, reversing into something at any speed in a Pinto was never a good idea. Jonathan's Galaxie 500 is another example of a hand-me-down that likely would have served well decades after it was constructed. Ford's full-size early 70 models were sturdy and reasonably well built for the time. Though not ideal as basic transportation of the 80s, they made up for the poor fuel mileage with decent power as they were not yet saddled with forthcoming smog-era devices. Though marketed when new as a fairly basic full-size model, enhanced features such as flow-through ventilation and advanced suspension were part of the package. Ford also offered the LTD. It was essentially the same car as Jonathan's Galaxie, but with more upscale features. Jonathan, however, is probably just fine with his trusty Galaxie 500. Hopper's Blazer was the vehicle of choice for many 80s rural law enforcement agencies. The CK pickup-based K5 Blazer was tough as nails and highly versatile. There was little that could stop a properly configured Blazer. Hopper's Blazer can be identified as a 1980 model by its single large rectangular headlamps stacked over turn signals. This was a one-year-only front-end style, as was common of this time period. A vast array of options and configurations ensured the Blazer was competitive in the rapidly expanding SUV market. Engine and drivetrain configurations were seemingly endless. Comfort and convenience features were also becoming more important to SUV buyers, and the Blazer delivered an increasingly car-like experience as time went on. Supremely versatile and infinitely configurable, Hopper's Chevy Blazer was a loyal companion to the end. The late 70s Camaro was, of course, the ultimate chariot of mullets and mustaches. Likely sporting denim from head to toe, owners of the 70s and 80s era GM pony cars were the ultimate in badassery. A more perfect ride could not have been chosen for Billy. Though movie cars are often modified, this example appears to be a 79 Z28 model based on the fender louver style and front air dam. Billy probably didn't appreciate the fact the giant 5.7-liter engine only produced 170 horsepower. And in his home state of California, an automatic gearbox was the only tranny on the menu. The Volvo sedan of the 80s was a slightly quirky yet perfectly practical choice for suburbanites. Its reputation for safety was legendary. Having debuted in the mid-70s, the design was decidedly dated by the 80s, yet it appealed to those who valued safety and that quirky aesthetic. Though they all looked essentially the same, several engine and trim level specifications were available. Regardless of the configuration chosen, most were somewhat slow, but thrifty and reasonably reliable. Dustin's mom no doubt found the Volvo to be the perfect choice for transporting her precious cargo. Steve's BMW is one of the few cars of Stranger Things that is more than just basic transportation. No doubt handed down by his wealthy parents as his first car, the 7 Series was a technological marvel of the early 80s. Sporting advanced electronics and luxury that far exceeded previous offerings from BMW, Steve's friends were no doubt very impressed, even if this example would have been a few years old by now. And the decent power of the time meant Steve could easily escape a fight when necessary. Lonnie Byers' Oldsmobile 442 is a car any 80s era middle-aged deadbeat dad would definitely aspire to own. A relic of a bygone era when raw power and endless sex appeal reigned supreme. The 442 was a sporty variant of the Cutlass and came in multiple body styles. As the values of these rare Oldsmobiles continued to rise, Lonnie no doubt sold his example, hopefully to help support finding his son. Bob's Toyota Camry is not just any Camry, it is the rare liftback model. This makes sense as Bob would have chosen the most practical of practical cars. The hatchback body style sold far less than the traditional sedan model, and few have survived. These days, most sightings of this generation of Camry are the far more common notchback style sedan. Just like Bob, the sight of a Camry liftback is special, and truly missed. The 80s Chevy van was already a very familiar sight, as the basic design had been around since 1971, with few changes. Available in a variety of wheelbases for both cargo and people-hauling purposes, the Chevy van was everywhere. From sport vans to two-tone near-luxury liners, options and configurations were seemingly limitless. Though the vans in Stranger Things were rather utilitarian, there were models to suit every need. Incredibly, this same body style would last more than 10 additional model years after the events of Stranger Things. Introduced in 1979, Ford's LTD was another ubiquitous sight on North American roads. Most drivers of the 80s would instantly recognize the set of Ford LTD headlights in the rearview mirror. The unique silhouette instantly had many a driver lowering the Sammy Hagar tunes and slowing back down to 55. Grandparents, of course, loved the Crown Victoria variant for its added luxury and padded vinyl accoutrements. And of course, the government and sinister organizations also favored the LTD for its practicality and reliable performance, and large trunk to store all sorts of things. The early 80s Eldorado was one of the last traditional, full-size front-wheel drive Cadillacs. Particularly in convertible form, it was the status symbol the old-school luxury connoisseur aspired to. Most Eldorados were of the notchback coupe variety, and though downsized over the 70 predecessor, Eldorado continued to offer truly classic American luxury. This generation of Eldorado would take its final bow for 1985, and for many, this signaled the twilight of true Cadillac style. The Chrysler LeBaron Convertible was not only famous for its legendary spokesperson, Ricardo Montalban, it was also one of the most successful convertibles of the 80s. It was part of a vast array of K-car variants and helped return Chrysler to profitability during the mid-80s. Though of course the current year is 1985, this model does appear to be an 86 model based on the third taillight and rounder tail lamps. So it's either an early model or a minor interdimensional time warp thing. Higher-end models featured Mark Cross designer interiors, and of course, simulated wood tone applique, inside and out. Long before massive SUVs, and even before minivans, there was the classic American station wagon. Probably one of the most beloved and missed family haulers of this bygone era. The Mercury Colony Park was a far rarer sight than its Ford twin, the Country Squire. Unique to the Mercury were wraparound taillights and a more formal front end. Acres of simulated wood and turbine wheels made the Colony Park one of the classiest family haulers of the 80s. Crushed velour, high-gloss wood trim, and jewel-like instrument panel details offered near Lincoln levels of luxury. Last but not least, Barb's beloved Volkswagen Cabriolet. Barb is immensely practical, yet has a style all her own, and the Cabriolet is her perfect little companion. It is one of those cars that defines the look of the 80s. Based on the first generation Volkswagen Golf, the Cabriolet was produced from 1980 to 1993. We'll likely never know how Barb ended up with a model several years from the future, as hers appears to be an 88 model year, but Barb has her ways. Though she's no longer with us, we know Barb escaped the surly bonds of the Upside Down, ascended into the light, and found love eternal. These were everyday cars that everyday people drove. Even today, most are forgotten and of little value, but the memories they evoke are forever and priceless.